Can the West Virginia Mountaineers get back on the winning track when they host the Duquesne Dukes this coming Saturday in their first home game of the 2023 football season? Well, I thought we'd get to know a little bit more about the Duquesne Dukes, so I decided to bring on a guest, Mr. Zac Weiss, and we're going to meet Zac right after this word from our sponsor.
Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you.
What is up, college sports fans, Big 12 fans, fellow members of Mountaineer Nation, and welcome in to another edition of Couz's Corner. Belly yourself up to the bar and let me pour you out a shot of top-shelf college football content. On tap today, I'm going to have a guest to help me do that. I'm going to bring on someone who covers the Duquesne Dukes for West Virginia Sports Now. You can find Zac on X, I guess, at Zachary M. Weiss. I've got it on the screen there for those of you who are watching. And obviously, like I said, you can find him over at West Virginia Sports Now, where he covers Duquesne sports. So, Zac, just to jump right in, man, first of all, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, of course. Glad to be here.
So, just real quick, just to give the West Virginia fans a little bit of general information about what they can expect from this Duquesne football team on Saturday.
Well, this is a Duquesne team that feels that it has a lot to prove. The last season was very injury-marred, affected a lot of the key positions that were going to make the team succeed, and as a result, they lost a lot of the close games did not go their way, and it just was a season that was kind of the antithesis of what the team's identity is. It's a team that's used to competing and used to winning NEC championships, and they're in fact the winningest team in the NEC overall within the last decade or so here. So it's a team that's used to winning, and I think that's something, given the proximity that West Virginia as a staff really and as a program really found attractive towards having this come up to fruition within the last couple of years. So for Duquesne fans, this is a good opportunity. The stadium's about an hour and a half, give or take, away from Rooney Field, which is where the Duquesne football team plays its home games. So it's an attractive game for both teams. I think for Duquesne, this is almost a checkpoint Charlie, a chance for a lot of returning pieces and a lot of new pieces, which there's a great mixture of both, to kind of see where they're at and where they need to build to make another push for another NEC title. And I think for West Virginia, I think obviously you don't plan on losing your first game out of the season. And I think there's a little bit of disappointment. There always is when you lose a game like that. It's also a team that was disappointed to have another road game. But sometimes, past success not necessarily being the case in last season, I think that, you kind of take what you can get. And I think maybe they could channel this ticked off energy and maybe channel it in a positive way and maybe make Duquesne a team that they hope that they can have a lot of success early and often with. So I think it's a pivotal game in different respects for both teams, but I think it's a pivotal game that for both teams for very different reasons.
Right. Makes sense. Thanks for that breakdown. And by the way, guys, I've got it on the screen for those of you who might be listening only. Duquesne will be coming to Morgantown to face the Mountaineers. The game will be on Saturday, September the 9th at 6 p.m. Kind of an odd start time, but that's what our athletic department chose. So it will kick off around 6 p.m. and it will air on Big 12 Now as part of the ESPN Plus, which is, part of the Big 12's television contract there to have some of these games streaming on ESPN Plus. But back to Duquesne, I heard our coach Neal Brown, say in his press conference earlier this week that Duquesne has a lot of players from that Pittsburgh area. Is that true? And if so, what would that mean what does that mean for these players to be able to play, right in their own backyard in such a big venue for them, I would imagine?
Well, certainly it's a big venue, and they talked a little bit about it after their win Saturday against Edinboro, which they were able to, as expected, do in convincing fashion. They did exactly what they set out to do, and yeah, I think having exciting matchups like this against opponents of high caliber, which Duquesne views West Virginia as, are a very good attractor for why someone transfers into Duquesne or why someone comes into Duquesne from the recruiting portal, right? I mean, obviously, this is a team that I mentioned from the opening has a very, very good track record of past success, and their coach, Jerry Schmidt, who's in his 19th season with the program and is the program's winningest head coach in the team's history. So there's a lot to be said about that. And I think the style of play that he has, the physical, fast, and smart, which really he wants to be the team's identity. Those are kind of the three bold kind of outlines for how he views his teams with what will be feast or famine for that team. But you have a lot of D1 guys that do transfer that find Duquesne. You've even had a couple guys that transferred in from Pitt even. So it is a good place to play, and Rooney Field's a unique venue. The soccer team uses it as well. The lacrosse team uses it as well, where there's a lot of fans that on one side of the field really do sit right on top of you. So there's a really close nature to it that makes it an interesting place to play. But yeah, you said it. I mean, again, this is an hour and a half away for them. So it's not anywhere near obviously a rivalry like it is with West Virginia and Pitt. Obviously, the backyard brawl there's no reason to outline anything regarding that. But obviously, playing there, potentially having an opportunity to get a result there is exciting for a team like Duquesne that's trying to put those pieces back together. And the belief is certainly there, but they still have a lot to prove to themselves, and the staff still has a lot of things that they have to figure out as well. So it's an interesting game at an interesting time, but Duquesne, I don't think, regardless of result, will be afraid of the moment. They've definitely faced some very tough opponents. Of course, Coach Brown mentioned the Ohio game on September 11th of 2021, almost 2 years to the day of this matchup, where they went to Ohio and got a very positive result. And the first team in the NEC to beat an FBS team is a very, very good accomplishment. So Duquesne's shown that they're up for the task. They faced some tough teams. They obviously had the week 0 against Hawaii recently as well in recent seasons. So there's been several top teams that they've played, haven't been able to get Pitt yet, of course, but there's something to be said there. But regardless of that, I mean, they're not shy of the moment, and this is a very, very good opportunity to play a game close where a lot of Duquesne's fans can travel and make the trip. I know Duquesne's radio broadcasters, Alex and Tad, will be there, so there's definitely a good chance to drum up a lot of interest in the program, bring some revenue into the program, and keep the interest in the program high. So there's a lot to be said for a matchup like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I heard Coach Brown talk in his press conference, and I think I heard you mention it on your appearance with Ryan and Rush earlier. These pay games, what they call pay games for these FCS schools, are very important for their programs. And that's one reason Coach Brown used to play and coach at an FCS school. So he gets the importance of these Power 5 games on the road for these FCS schools. It's what props their program up, or at least helps do that. And then they're going to get exposure by playing on ESPN Plus. Gives a lot of people who might want to turn on and watch West Virginia, like myself, for example. I've got kids who will be going to college soon. Maybe there'll be somebody watching this game and decide, you know what, I want to check out Duquesne. Let's see what kind of school Duquesne is. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there, like you say, to not only fans can travel. It's easier to travel for the team, as far as away games go, but and obviously the payout, cash payout means a lot, but it's the exposure piece too that I think can mean a lot for these FCS teams.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, there's definitely multiple sides that this benefits Duquesne, again, like we've both really outlined, and it'll help the team move forward. I mean, these matchups have been very, very good. Going to a place like Hawaii and getting that experience for a lot of guys that are trying to get that opportunity is really, really helpful. There's no two ways around that, and there's definitely been some positives that have come out of that as well. So Duquesne definitely has a lot to look forward to this weekend, win or lose, and I think they definitely are going to treat it like that. But obviously, when they're there, as coach speak as it is, it's definitely a business trip. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, absolutely, and I have no doubt they're going to want to. They have plans to come in and try to win this football game. We see FCS teams beat Power 5 teams every single year, So it's West Virginia cannot let their guard down in this game, or Duquesne could step up and bite them. But you mentioned earlier, some Power 5 transfers. I was looking at your running back, Taj Brooks. He's a Power 5 transfer from Missouri, actually. Ran the ball 9 times for 104 yards in last week's win over Edinboro. Can you talk about him a little bit and what he brings to this team?
Well, it's very clear that Taj has the opportunity to be explosive, and I think you're going to see kind of a two-pronged running attack, specifically with Taj and Jamario Clements. And talking to Coach Schmidt and a couple of the players on the team leading up to everything, Taj and Jamario were both guys that were mentioned as guys that came in and had an impact at camp. Clements is a guy that specifically has kind of had to wait his turn for a couple of seasons because there just were a couple of talented tailbacks that were on that roster that just had that exposure and experience. And this kind of was viewed as his chance. And Clements, yeah, he had 47 yards, but he had a touchdown out of it. And Butts had a 39-yard rush on a first half sequence drive that led to a score. So both have the ability where they kind of bring something a little bit different. I think that it's very glowing that they did what they were supposed to do last week again against an Edinboro opponent that they're expected to take care of business again, because it's also a glowing mark for the offensive line that depth-wise, maybe it's a little bit of a position that is an area where Duquesne's had a lot more to prove than other positions on that football field, and it's something that very much could come into play come Saturday as well. So having a guy like Taj break off runs is very important for this team, and establishing that identity early in the season is extremely crucial, especially as a transfer. You want to make sure the fit makes sense. You want to make sure that you feel comfortable, and it's clear that from day one, Taj has been able to make a name for himself on this team and help be a part of this team reach a goal that they feel is certainly attainable.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah. And are there any other Power Five transfers uh, on this team that we might see on Saturday?
Well, I think you have a transfer. I mean, not necessarily Power Five, but I mean, what you were able to see from DJ Powell, for example, was huge. I mean, DJ Powell transfers in. He's a guy that obviously, anytime you transfer in again, it's a thing where you're just trying to get an identity within a program and understand what makes them tick. And Powell's a guy that played for Bethune Cookman, so he's a guy that's been proven to an extent, and he's a guy that really was able to showcase his way through. So to get 2 touchdowns, 6'3", he was able to win a 50-50 ball. That is very, very impressive in and of itself. So, it's a guy that really has been able to come in, and wide receiver, I think, was another question mark for the team, and really seeing some depth where you have a lot of wide receivers have an opportunity to play and showcase themselves on a football field. There's a lot of unknown, and I think that brings some certain questions into the realm of play. And obviously, again, you can't really take a look at everything. It's hard to take when you're facing an opponent that isn't really necessarily of the caliber that Duquesne brings, but it's certainly something that is very, very optimistic. There's a lot of optimism behind having a game like that so early in the season. So I think that DJ Powell's a guy that really could make a difference for a Duquesne receiving group that does have some talent in it as well. I mean, one of the wide receivers, Andy Isabella, had an injury that he overcame last year and had some plays where he was in the end zone and be able to get a step, but just the connection wasn't quite there at that point in time. But Isabella was one of two guys that was an NEC preseason selection, AJ Ackerman on the defensive side being the other. So there's definitely having Powell as a transfer coming in is interesting as well. And slightly off topic, but since you brought up the transfers, it was interesting that when you have a convincing lead over an opponent in week one, which Duquesne did, that Jerry Schmidt did kind of go with a little bit of those guys on the bench to see how they would go, and some of those guys being transfers. It was interesting to see him kind of mix old and new so that they could kind of try to find the identity they were building in camp. So it's definitely something where, win or lose the result, you could see a lot more guys maybe from both teams that kind of try to have opportunities that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have. And as both teams are working in this non-conference to figure out who the guys are that they can most trust moving forward, it's why games like these are really important, because maybe otherwise you wouldn't necessarily have that opportunity to find that.
Yeah, definitely a great opportunity for both, like you said, for both teams, I think, to get guys on the field that, whether it be your walk-ons or just scholarship players that, you want to get minutes or get snaps because they won't get them later in the year, Very important for the program and building that culture, in my opinion. And I apologize, everybody. I'm under the weather today, so I have a little bit of a cough here. But moving on, Zach, let's talk about the quarterback for a minute. Darrius Perrantes. Did I say that right?
It is Perrantes.
Perrantes. He went 7 of 13 for 135 yards, 2 touchdowns in their win last week. Tell West Virginia fans a little bit about Darrius and what they can expect for him. What kind of player is he?
Well, not to say anything about the intro, but he also had a rushing touchdown as well. So he played one half, and then he was subbed out for Matt Robinson, a Fresno State transfer. So Duquesne actually played 3 quarterbacks in their opener, which was an interesting decision. I mean, it's tough, right? Because you have your first game of the season and you don't want anybody to get injured. And when it is hot outside, you worry about the cramps. And naturally, that's very much a thing when you're playing another team and you're playing under the sun. You're not necessarily playing under the lights. So I think they saw what they needed to see from Perrantes. And really, it was interesting that they made that decision. But having what he did, he was pretty sound in the pocket. He went down once, but he wasn't necessarily tested. He's always been a guy that's had the ability to dance in and out of the pocket to try to find a receiver, which he certainly did. And I think West Virginia fans will expect to see that on Saturday, especially when the offensive line might have some ebbs and flows as it continues to grow and learn together. But Darrius is a guy that's had opportunities each of the last season, though it's kind of been at the extent of Joe Mishler, who has since moved on from the team, and kind of the injury bug. But this is very clearly Darrius's team, and I think he understands the responsibility that comes with it. And he's a guy that's grown on the field and also grown off the field as a leader of the team. And I think that early returns were good. I think that there's obviously some, maybe he could have made this throw when he danced, or maybe he missed this route. And I think that Coach Schmidt said after the game that he took the control and was showing the leadership, both of which were checks. And sometimes, when you have those plays in the pocket, you see them as a fan and you're excited to see them. But naturally, as a coach, there's the nitpick. Maybe he missed a read. And that's not something that he would be able to get away with on Saturday. But as he continues to learn and grow with this team, I think that's something that is going to come more naturally to him. I think he's going through a very much a learning curve, and you have a wide receiving core that's very new, whether it's to the team, whether it's to having more of a leading role, whatever the case may be. And when you have a 2-headed monster at running back, which Duquesne's shown the ability to, and they also had some depth that also showed some rushing ability as well. Edward Robinson really comes to mind late in game, bowling through some defenders as well. So I think that Duquesne kept things fresh. I think as a competitor and as a fan, maybe you wanted to see Darrius out there a little bit more, but by that point in time, the game was over at that point in time. Halftime, it was very clear. The first quarter was a very, very long quarter. It was actually at the point that Coach Schmidt at halftime came up to me and asked what time it was. But regardless of that, it was one that Duquesne rolled with the punches. And on both sides of the ball, they did exactly what they needed to do to win that football game. And they know that by no means is Saturday going to be a cakewalk. It's going to be every single play is under a microscope. And I think that's a test that Darrius is going to be really excited to face. He's a determined guy. He's a little bit softer spoken speaking with media, but he certainly lets his play do the talking. And there's no doubt about that this is a game that's going to be big for his development. And if he can do some good things, regardless of the result, I think that's something he can, take solace in and maybe move forward and make some better decisions. And seeing on film, I think it'll be even more critical, saying, hey, this is what the next steps are. And I think that Darrius has the tools, he has the belief. Question is whether he can put it together, and he certainly can.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to seeing how the young man plays on Saturday against, higher level of competition. It'd be a huge, this will be, some of these guys are probably going to look at this as kind of their Super Bowl, for lack of a better term. It's their chance to showcase their talents on on national television, so to speak, in front of more people than they probably ever play against, right? Or play in front of, rather. So it's always good to see guys get that opportunity. Are there any other players besides, we've touched on Butts, we've touched on Perrantes, and we touched on the receivers, but are there any other players on this Duquesne team that West Virginia fans need to be aware of and, may step up and contribute big on Saturday?
The defense is clearly this team's strength. Anytime the defense is on the field, it's going to feel really, really good. And I think that defense really embodies the attitude that the team had Aiden Garnes was named one of the NEC's prime performers for week 1. It was literally the first pass play of the game for Edinboro, the second play overall, and he jumped a route and got a pick 6 out of it, and just right out of the eye, he saw out of the hand where the ball was going to go. He said it was a play he saw in training camp, and really it showed how much Duquesne really did their homework, and they were just ball hawks defensively. You have guys like Kevin Kurzinger, Gianni Russo that were forcing fumbles, Ty Howard with 5 tackles with 1 sack, tackle and a half for a loss. You have the veteran Ezekiel Dower that had a second half interception. Tim Lowry came back from a season-ending injury last year, had an interception. Edinboro as a team had 4 turnovers just in the first quarter alone. So it's very clear, and those are just other names. And obviously, AJ Ackerman, who I mentioned earlier, who was given preseason all-conference honors. So there's a lot of guys in the defense, and some of them I didn't even mention there, but it's just a testament to just how Duquesne feels that it can be a very deep team, and with that depth makes it feel very dangerous. And just defensively, even talking to one of the veterans the day after the game, he said, I've been with this team for a while, but this is the deepest I've seen the defense. And that's what makes us really scary. And just having that knowledge that the defense just has that much belief in itself heading into the first game, and you have both sides of the ball saying, we were ready for this first game 2 weeks ago. That's really exciting if you're a Duquesne fan. And the fact that the defense has such a clear identity, it was not an overnight thing. This took a couple of years for this team to build, but just it's a team defensively. It takes a lot of pride in what it does. It definitely puts in the work. And I really think that the depth really showed also. So I think the entire defense probably gets a nod for that Saturday effort. Some of those standouts were just mentioned. And West Virginia will face a defense that it can't take for granted, but the defense also has to realize that big plays will be given up, and it's up to them to find a response. But I think how this defense goes on Saturday with Duquesne will determine how this team goes. And if they can play off of that Duquesne and find some success, then who knows what could happen. So if Duquesne gets a 3-and-out on the first play, then on the first series, then who knows how things turn out. But there's a lot of belief in this team. That's very clear. And to have that done in front of 3 championship teams that were recognized at halftime too, just a small feather in their hat as well. They saw the standard literally right in front of them. And to have such an early return where guys and fans are just coming up and saying such positive things, that's a very good sign. It's tough to say if the standard is back because, again, it was an opponent they were very much expected to beat. But you have a lot of fans that will definitely be excited to head into Morgantown. I know, speaking to some longtime fans that really support the team, and some alums, they definitely plan on being in attendance. So there definitely will be a Duquesne presence, and there's an expectation that comes with that. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, these games against FCS opponents always scare me because you see, like I said earlier, every weekend you see an FCS team somewhere around the country beat a Power 5 team. In West Virginia, so far, they've came close a few times, but so far they've never lost to an FCS opponent. So, it makes me wonder at some point it's probably going to happen. And I just keep waiting for that moment, and I hope it's not this weekend, but, the fact these kids there's so many of these young men that are local, there's going to be a lot of family in attendance, things like that. I worry that this team is going to come in with a big chip on their shoulder. They're going to be ready to play. They're going to be excited. And if West Virginia doesn't bring that same intensity, that concerns me a little bit. Speaking of that, what do you think Duquesne has to do to pull an upset in this game over West Virginia?
The first key would be mind over emotion. There's a lot to be said about playing in an environment. There's going to be a lot of West Virginia fans that are there for a home opener. And regardless of what the past is, there's always an expectation. I mean, speaking as someone at Duquesne, you always have Duquesne basketball, and you have an older crowd of fans that always have that belief. This is the year. This is the year. And this year's no different. They're going to bemoan some of the things that were missed late. They were going to bemoan what Penn State did that they viewed as unsportsmanship towards the end. So there's going to be a West Virginia crowd that's going to be very rowdy, and it's going to be on Duquesne to focus on themselves. And that's not necessarily easy to do. You feel like the little brother. You feel like you have a lot to prove. You feel like this is a real good chance for us to prove ourselves and leave our imprint as a team on this season. This is a chance to really make West Virginia fans panic. This they're going to overlook us for Pitt. There's a lot of things that you're going to consider. And I think when you overlook any team, I mean, heck, Pitt overlooked Youngstown State. You saw how that went. So, I mean, historically. So there's nothing to say it can't be done. And I think Coach Brown knows that, and he's going to tell his players that. But West Virginia, how they respond to having a difficult loss and the standard, maybe what they see across the football field being a little bit different and not playing down to that or not playing against expectations on that. There's a lot to be said. I think if Duquesne can handle the moment, it's tough because you almost want West Virginia to have the ball first, right? Because you want the fans to cheer loudly and you play to your defensive strength. And if you can make some noise of your own, getting a quick stand, then you're off to the races possibly. So you almost want to dare West Virginia to beat you with the football right away. And that might be a little bit of a scary process for West Virginia. And because the fans are going to have those expectations, and there's not going to be a lie, it's going to be extremely crowded there again, just because of the expectation and because it's like that first of the month paycheck, right? You're so excited to see it. You're so excited to spend it. And I think both teams have that flavor. And obviously, Duquesne want to know if they lose that game against Edinboro, then maybe they're feeling a little bit sorry for themselves, but they feel like they're coming in with a little bit of swagger, and there's a lot of things on tape that they're going to see that they're going to have to work on. And West Virginia, I'm certain, feels the exact same way. So there is a certain expectation that both teams have. You never go into a venue expecting to lose, and I think Duquesne feels that they have enough tools in the toolbox where they feel that they can get a result or at least do enough to generate positivity where they can watch on film and say, look, we did this right. When it comes time for conference play, what counters are going to be to make to be able to be a better team on that field to make sure that we reach our goals. So it's a very, very interesting game. I'm glad both teams scheduled. I'm glad Coach Brown views these games as being important, and they are really, as we've discussed for so many reasons. But can Duquesne go into the field, be unafraid of the moment, and play fearlessly for each other? That's the question. And if they do that, is it going to be because they rise to the occasion, or is it going to be because West Virginia falls short of their standards? So it's going to be on Duquesne to, again, not worry about the other side of the football field, be mature like they were on Saturday and play to the whistle, not after the whistle, and find results. There's going to be a very good chance that some plays don't go their way in a row, and it's up to them to keep a steady head and just focus on that next play. And that, when you're sometimes the little brother, isn't always necessarily the easiest thing to do. So it'll be interesting under the lights, and truly under the lights, for Duquesne, since West Virginia's had that luxury and Duquesne really hasn't, because they played a game at noon. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I don't expect many empty seats, and I'm looking forward to seeing a bird's eye view from the stadium, how everything goes.
Yeah, you brought up a great point about, this game being sandwiched in between two big games for West Virginia, being obviously the Penn State game being a top 10 team on the road. Then you've got the big rivalry game with, Pitt coming up the week after. To be honest with you, I hadn't even thought about that dynamic here. Could West Virginia look ahead here? Will they overlook Duquesne in preparation for that Pitt game? Obviously, we know, we hope not. And if they do, hopefully it doesn't last more than a series or two, right? But as a West Virginia fan. But that being said, Zach, this is the last question, then I'll let you get out of here. Do you feel comfortable giving a score prediction?
Well, I went with 35-17, and I think that's going to scare a lot of West Virginia fans. Frankly, I'm not so high on on West Virginia. I
Right.
haven't been given necessarily a reason to. I think they played with some heart last week, but I don't think that was enough. They just fell short in different areas. And I think Duquesne definitely played with some heart. Now, they were definitely helped by having a lot of fans there relative to the stadium, and it'll be nice to drum up some interest in this program, which is definitely never hurts. I think that whether it's quote-unquote garbage time scores, or whether West Virginia, I think, comes out with a slow foot, which is entirely possible, just given the emotion of the game and maybe given some of the other things that we talked about overlooked, standard of play, just belief in self-belief, self-doubt, whatever the case may be. I think Duquesne might knock a little bit in there, and if it stays close like that the whole way through, it'll be interesting to see, does Coach Brown go with some switches? Does Coach Schmidt go with some changes? I just don't necessarily know the answer to that question. And it's a question that I don't think they're going to have to handle things game by game and make series by series and make decisions. And could Duquesne look at this as a big game? Absolutely, and they should. Though they also need to understand that it's still a non-conference game, and a win or a loss does not change their goals. Now, a win would be huge and draw a lot of interest in the program, but if Duquesne gets a loss, they also need to understand the importance that a loss is just that. It's a non-conference loss, and it's a learning lesson. And how do you take yourselves from there? If they play with the emotion that they need to and find some positivity in that, win or lose, I think it's a win. But you can't get caught up if West Virginia rolls over 2-3 scores in the first quarter like Duquesne did, and then it's just a total 360. It's a mature group, but it's always a mature group for both sides until adversity hits in a negative way. And I think it's important for both teams to understand that. And it will be an interesting game because both teams are in very, very different places right now, but both teams are in similar places in the same stretch. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out on the field. I think Duquesne's a more talented team than I think a lot of West Virginia fans realize, but it's a different standard, like we've said. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Both teams have pieces that could allow for a victory, and I think Duquesne naturally is used to being an underestimated school in all athletics fields, and sometimes they use that as a chip on their shoulder. A lot of Duquesne teams have had a "why not us" mantra, and I'm sure that the football team is going to lean on that as well. And again, how that plays out will be very interesting, but it's another good opportunity for a program that is a good group of guys that plays well, but how good a group of guys it is doesn't matter when the lights come on, and they're going to have to suck it up and play together and fight through some adversity, and whichever team handles the adversity better is going to be on top. But I think that's going to be West Virginia 35-17, which I think, again, would scare some WVU fans, but the team desperately needs a win, just getting some momentum and having some positivity behind it. But Duquesne needs to be just as desperate and just as hungry, and I think they can certainly handle that task.
Awesome. Thank you for that prediction there. Yeah, 35-17 would definitely scare me as a West Virginia fan. Because, as you always expect these Power 5 FCS games to be totally lopsided so you can play your backups. If it's 35-17, we may not see a lot of backups on the field, which is not what you want as a Power 5 team. Now, it wouldn't mean your season's over necessarily, but it definitely wouldn't make us fans feel good. And I'm telling you, there are so many fans out there who are down on Neal Brown right now. It wouldn't help that either by any stretch of the imagination. But anyway, Zach, real quick, man, I introduced you earlier, but if you don't mind, go ahead and let my listeners know where they can find you at and where they can find your work.
Well, certainly, my main roles are with the Pittsburgh Sports Now family, which is an offshoot of West Virginia Sports Now. I mainly cover Duquesne athletics. I'm actually approaching my 600th Duquesne event covered, which is actually daunting to think about because we actually celebrated the 500th in October, and here we are approaching 600, which is actually crazy to think about. I've covered most, if not every sport at Duquesne, which is crazy to think about. And basketball season's right around the corner, so gearing up for that as well. But at Zac Weiss on X. Anyways, but you have that. Just it's something, right? Just Instagram at Zac Weiss. I'll be active on X probably throughout the game as well, and always up for a conversation. So we really appreciate the opportunity to cover Duquesne athletics and to be someone that's been considered a credible source. It's not something I take lightly to be a credible source in Duquesne athletics, and I've done it through just the good old-fashioned hard work for several years now. And it doesn't happen without a lot of people, my readership first of which, but of course many on down. So thankful for that trust. And absolutely, I mean, the journey's taken me a long way with the Pittsburgh Sports Now family. I'm really, really grateful to be a part of that. Obviously, meet people like Mike Osti, which was how we were able to get connected as well. Mike's one of the good guys, so I'll always say that about Mike. So really, really grateful to cover the game with him. Really, really thankful for having this platform with you and just give people a chance to experience at least a little bit more about Duquesne so they kind of know the opponent or quote unquote know the enemy, so to speak, here coming into it. So it'll be an interesting football game, regardless of what the score is, because I think it'll be telling for both teams and where they are moving forward. So Just for myself, yeah, again, at Zachary M. Weiss is always the best way to follow me. Twitter, X. It's like Heinz Field. You're used to calling it Heinz Field, and everybody wants you to call it Acrisure because
Right.
people pay a lot of money. So there's a lot to be said about that. But thankful for the platform and just appreciative, and already counting the days down to Saturday. Looking forward to it, and looking forward to being in the press box covering.
Absolutely. And I apologize. I just realized when I heard you do your introduction there, early in the show, I said West Virginia Sports Now instead of Pittsburgh Sports Now. So they are sister companies, but still, I did screw that up. But nonetheless, he's part of the Pittsburgh Sports Now family, which is a sister, basically, to West Virginia Sports Now. But Zach, thank you again for coming on, man. Thanks for your time. I know you're a busy guy, especially this week. I'm sure you are very popular this week among West Virginia outlets. But again, thank you, and look forward to Saturday, and hopefully we can do this again in the future.
It's always good to be popular. If this is the way that I'm popular, hey, I will be happy to do that. So thank you for the shout, and appreciate it. And again, looking forward to Saturday. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And as always, Q Country Roads.